All right, ready to dive into some really interesting stuff.
I think interesting might be an understatement. This deep dive you've brought us, it's a story from the Book of Nephi, right?
Yeah. It's got everything you could ask for family secrets, a journey to a new land, and at the heart of it all, this quest for something incredibly valuable.
It's a story that a lot of folks might think they already know, but honestly, when you really get into it...
There's a lot more to uncover, right?
Yeah, totally. It goes way beyond the surface. You start seeing these themes of faith, obedience, and the weight of history, and it just hits you how relevant it still is, even thousands of years later.
Exactly. So let's back up a bit for those who might not be as familiar. What's the backdrop for this story?
We're talking about a family making their way to a promised land, led by a prophet named Lehi, kind of like that whole Exodus story, but with a more, intimate, family-centered vibe.
I like a more personal Exodus.
Yes. And it's in this setting that Lehi receives a divine message through a dream, telling him to get his hands on these engraved plates.
These plates, they aren't just like your average dinnerware, are they? What makes them so special?
Oh, man, think of them more like spiritual and historical treasures, Imagine all your family history, your entire ancestry, combined with, the religious and cultural records of a whole people. And now imagine all that carved onto these plates. That's what we're dealing with here.
Whoa, that's a pretty intense inheritance.
Yeah.
So how do these plates play into the actual story?
So these plates, they're in the possession of this guy named Laban. And Lehi, he sends his sons off to retrieve them. And already you can kind of sense some underlying tension, right? You've got family dynamics, a long and probably stressful journey, and this super important mission.
Yeah, it sounds like it's about to get complicated fast. So how does this first encounter with Laban go down? Does he just hand over the family heirlooms?
Not exactly. See, Laban isn't exactly driven by, family sentimentality. One of the brothers, Laman, tries to appeal to that to convince Laban to do the right thing, but it backfires completely.
Really? What happened?
Laban accuses him of trying to steal the plates and even threatens to take his life.
Intense. Sounds like things escalated quickly. Even back then, family stuff could get messy, huh? What do they do?
Well, the brothers are obviously shaken up, and some of them just want to cut their losses and go home, which honestly is a pretty understandable reaction.
Yeah, I can see that.
But then there's Nephi, one of the brothers, who's really at the heart of this story. He refuses to give up. He is determined to finish this mission no matter what stands in his way.
He sounds like he's got that unwavering kind of spirit.
Mm-hmm.
What is it about the plates, or maybe the mission itself, that makes him so persistent?
Right. It makes you think. It's like Nephi represents this total commitment to something so much bigger than himself. He reminds his brothers that this isn't just their dad's request. This is a divine command. He even points out how much their father has already sacrificed and stresses that a lot of times obedience isn't easy.
It's that classic struggle between what you're called to do, what you believe in, and then the reality of actually doing it. So what happens next? Do they try and come up with a plan to get these plates back?
They go for a more direct approach this time. They go back to Laban. But this time, they come with an offer: gold, silver, precious things, a king's ransom, basically. Imagine putting your family's entire fortune on the line for something you believed in.
Wow, that's a powerful statement about what those plates meant to them. So does he take the deal?
You'd think so, right? I mean, that's a huge sacrifice. But Laban, well, let's just say he's not exactly the selfless type.
Ah, so it doesn't go as planned.
Not even close. Laban sees all this wealth and, greed takes over.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah.
No.
He orders his men to kill the brothers and keep everything for himself.
Wow. That's pretty cold. Talk about a negotiation tactic. But it really makes you think about the contrast, right?
What do you mean?
Well, you've got the brothers driven by their faith and this desire to preserve their family's legacy. And then there's Laban, completely consumed by greed. It's like a timeless clash of values.
It really is. Laban's actions, they kind of force you to confront the dark side of desire, like how material wealth can corrupt even basic human decency. But on the flip side, it also underscores just how committed the brothers were to something bigger than themselves.
I mean, they were willing to risk it all. So what happens to them? Do they at least make it out alive?
They do escape, but they have to leave everything behind. All that family fortune, the plates, everything. They flee into the wilderness, empty-handed, and you can only imagine the mix of emotions they must have been feeling.
Fear, anger, disappointment.
Absolutely. They poured everything into this mission, and now they're stranded, no closer to fulfilling their father's wishes.
It's got to be a heavy burden to carry. So what do they do? How do they even process this?
They do what many of us probably would in that situation. They turn on each other. Arguments break out, blame gets tossed around. They even start questioning whether this whole thing was a mistake.
It's interesting how even in these grand stories of faith and divine purpose, those human moments of doubt and conflict still shine through.
They do. It keeps things relatable, right?
Absolutely. So what changes things for them? How do they find their way back?
Just when things seem their bleakest, something pretty amazing happens. An angel appears before them.
Whoa, like a for real angel.
Yeah, not just a voice or a feeling, but a full-on celestial being sent to deliver a message.
Talk about divine intervention. What does the angel say?
The message is basically, get your act together. The angel reminds them that God is on their side, they're on the right path, and they will get those plates. You'd think that would be enough to erase all doubts, right?
You'd think. That's one heck of a pep talk, but sounds like there's a twist coming.
And it's a good one. See, some of the brothers are totally reassured, but others, particularly Laman and Lemuel, they're still skeptical.
Really? Even after seeing an angel?
Even after that. They just can't reconcile this promise with their current reality. They're thinking, how are we supposed to get these plates from a guy like Laban? He's ruthless.
It's that classic battle between faith and logic. The part of us that wants to believe in something bigger, and then the part that gets stuck on the how-tos.
Exactly. And that tension makes their journey even more compelling, because they're not just blindly obeying, they're wrestling with real doubts and very real dangers.
So what wins out? Do they give in to the doubt, or does that angel's message give them the push they need? So which is it? Do they listen to that doubt, or does that angel's message give them the strength to keep going?
It's amazing how this whole story brings together faith and action. The angel doesn't just give them a solution, but kind of nudges them in the right direction, tells them to go back to Jerusalem where Laban will be delivered into their hands.
Okay, so there's a plan, but it still requires a whole lot of trust, right?
Yeah.
So what happens when they get back to Jerusalem? Do they find a bunch of angels ready to storm Laban's palace?
Not quite. Remember, this story is all about how divine help and human choice work together. It's about recognizing those opportunities even when they show up in the most unexpected ways.
I'm hooked. Tell me more. Paint us a picture here. What happens next?
Picture this. The brothers are in Jerusalem, this bustling city so different from the wilderness they've been wandering in. And that's when they see Laban.
What? Talk about a coincidence. What are the chances?
And here's where things get really interesting. They find Laban, but he's not exactly in a powerful position. He's actually, well, let's just say he enjoyed himself a little too much at some fancy feast and passed out in the street.
Oh, wow. Talk about perfect timing. Seems like fate, or maybe something more, had a hand in that encounter. But even if he's had a bit too much to drink, Laban is still supposed to be a pretty tough guy, right? What do?
This is where the story takes another turn. Nephi's faced with a tough decision. Does he defy what he believes is a divine command, or does he take a life to get those plates and do what he believes is right?
It's so easy for us to sit here thousands of years later and say what he should have done. But in that moment, facing that choice, it must have felt impossible.
Definitely. And the story doesn't shy away from how difficult it was. It forces us to think about those gray areas of morality, those times when what seems like a clear decision is actually full of doubt and unimaginable consequences.
So what happens? How does Nephi deal with this impossible situation?
Guided by what he feels is the Spirit of God and maybe a bit of, adrenaline, Nephi takes Laban's life. And he uses the very sword his father had given to Laban as a gift earlier.
Wow, that's heavy. The sword that was supposed to be a symbol of peace becomes the tool of a tragic act. It makes you think about how even when we're trying to do what's right, we might end up making choices with serious repercussions.
It's a harsh reminder that the path to fulfilling a purpose is rarely a straight line. It's often filled with trials that test our values and force us to face the complicated nature of being human.
So they have the plates, but at a great cost. Is that the end of the story?
Well, Nephi disguises himself as Laban and tells Laban's servant Zoram to bring him the plates. Zoram doesn't suspect a thing and follows Nephi back to the others.
What a story. They come back, not just with the plates, but with a story that would last for generations. But that whole situation, that moment of crisis, it really sticks with you, doesn't it?
It really does. It makes you question your own beliefs about faith, about sacrifice, about how far you'd go for something you believe in. It's one of those stories that stays with you long after you've heard it. And in a way, isn't that the mark of a truly great story?
For sure.
One that sparks conversation, one that challenges what you thought you knew, one that invites you to really wrestle with what it means to be human.
Absolutely. It reminds us that sometimes the most profound truths come not from easy answers, but from asking those tough questions. And what better way to grapple with those questions than through the power of a story told and retold, inviting each of us to find our own meaning within it.